Hi there, I'm Leah, and welcome to the House of Hormones podcast. Dr. Harper, I'm so excited to have you here today. I'm a huge fan of everything that you do and all the advocacy work that you do for women's health.
Yeah, so I'm a medical doctor. I'm Dr. Shahzadi Harper. I am a mum, of a daughter, but I'm also founder of my clinic, the Harper Clinic, which is a perimenopause and menopause clinic. I was a GP for a long time in Oxford, and then decided that this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to specialize in, women's midlife health, basically because I was approaching that time of life, or I was in that time of life. But also because my mother has dementia, and I was sure that it had been accelerated around this stage and age. And I really thought that, women weren't getting the care that they deserved and needed, or the understanding, once they got to their sort of early 40s. And, perimenopause and menopause, we don't really get taught much about it, and all we mostly know is it's hot flushes or moody women. But actually, it's so much more, and it's so much more complicated and so much more challenging, I think, and that yet we've got so much more living to do afterwards.
Absolutely. Oh, wow. You've covered so much in that. Wow. So many questions to ask. Let's start with what do you wish every woman knew about perimenopause before they get there? Because like you've just said, you were a GP before and you decided to specialize in this area because you got to a certain age and it all of a sudden was very evident, and you've seen it with your mother. Why do women not know about it, and what do you wish they knew?
Well, I wish they just knew the word perimenopause, because I think we all know the word menopause and we all think, oh, that's when our periods end. It happens around 50. And I think I wish women knew that this could start much earlier and much sooner than they realize, like 10 years beforehand. So, from your late 30s, early 40s, you can start to experience symptoms. And I wish that I could tell them you're not going crazy, because these hormones are very powerful chemical messengers. They affect so many aspects of you, your brain, your mental health, your mood, your weight, your energy levels. There's so many aspects that they impact. So, it's not your fault that you're feeling like this, because there's these chemical processes going on, which we haven't really been taught about when we were at school. Yet we get taught about puberty, having babies, preventing pregnancy. But really, we don't get told about that other side of the hormonal sort of spectrum, which is perimenopause and menopause. So I really wish that everybody knew those words, from almost like as it was just normal to know what perimenopause was, or it's normal to know what menopause is. Just like I said, with puberty and pregnancy and all of those things.
But also perimenopause. So women say, in their late 30s, early 40s, really think that this is something that's for women that are much older. And also it has such a taboo aligned with it. So they're embarrassed to say, oh, my symptoms might be perimenopause. Why is it such a taboo?
Well, I think there's a lot of denial because, maybe they look in the mirror and they think I'm way too young for this. Also, there is that taboo, and it's quite a negative connotations. In the past, I think we've been told that, people are sort of dried up, shriveled, not sexy, not fertile, what's your purpose? And I think, because for women, the way that they look, and the way that they are perceived very much is around sort of almost like the fertile side of things, and also that sort of sexy image or looking good is really, they feel that maybe society's not going to accept them, they're written off. And so I think there is that very, very negative sort of connotation around it. And, I would say, like, when I was in my 20s, I very much did think like that. Oh my goodness, a 50-year-old woman, she's past it, she seems to be quite sort of I don't know, moody and mean and bitchy. And yet, I think that's why. I think that's because we've had this sort of negative narrative around it. It's almost comedic. And that's why it's time to sort of normalize, change it. And that's being open about it and sort of saying, oh, I'm perimenopausal, like, for example, yourself saying it, me saying it, or, menopausal. It's just, well, actually, you're putting a different face to it, and you think, it can't be that bad, if they're talking about it openly.
And I think, like, another way that I often say to people is think of it like puberty, but on the other side. So we have puberty that really kind of starts, your periods. And on the other side, we have perimenopause, and that's kind of a lot of hormonal shifts to kind of signify the end of your period. And that's basically it in a tin. But for some reason, we can talk about puberty quite openly.
You seem kind of going towards something, like you're going towards adulthood, you're going towards youth. And I think that, sort of the reverse puberty aspect, when you get to perimenopause, it feels like, oh, it's downhill, you're aging, you're sort of declining, they're those downward type sort of words. And so you think, oh, I'm just getting old, I'm not getting, I'm getting fat, or, I'm just aging, that kind of thing. So I think it's more because it seems like it's downhill.
Yeah. And so at the Harper Clinic, you have like a full 360 approach, don't you? To women's midlife health. What does that actually look like when we talk about a 360 approach? And why is that different to how a normal GP appointment would address women's midlife health?
Well, I think firstly, in a normal GP appointment, you'll have 10 minutes. So I think that's why they can only focus on one aspect. And for me, the 360 is not, it's looking at both the medical and the holistic side of things, in the sense of also looking at you as a person. So it's very tailored and bespoke. We all live quite different lives. Some of us may have children, some of us may not, some of us may have partners, some of us may not, some of us may be working in different kind of jobs and things. So it's looking at all the dimensions of a woman and the impact of her symptoms, because two women could have same symptoms, but they could impact her in a very different way, because one's got much more stress in her life, or has much more demands in her life than another person. So, and it's also looking at women's health in a very proactive way, because I really felt that at this point there is a gender health inequality and a real misalignment of understanding of what's going on in midlife for women. Things like, well, heart disease risk increases once we approach menopause, diabetes risk, those metabolic changes. So it's not just about you're looking at your hot flushes or your hormones. It's looking at, well, where are you now? Where are you going? How can we make it better for you? Having an understanding that this change and shift in hormones does have a more accelerated aging aspect for women compared to men, but also our health risks do increase, body fat distribution changes, and also the mental health aspect. It's not just about the physical, it's also the mental. One of the main symptoms that many women experience in perimenopause is anxiety or loss of confidence, self-esteem, loss, that feeling of fatigue. So it's really putting all of those pieces of the jigsaw together to create a plan for you, and not just saying, look, here are a few pills, or here's your, sort of HRT, but it's looking at what your concerns, what your needs are, and tailoring them to what you can do in your day to day. I mean, I get sometimes a bit frustrated, when you see sort of influencers and PTs and nutritionists talking about X, Y, Z. And I
Yeah.
think, yes, fine, that they're not talking wrong. But, it's a full-time job being a woman, it's sort of, you just eating well, moving, looking after, family. You might be looking after parents or, children, also a partner. It's all that sort of juggle that you're doing. And then on top of that, you're thinking, well, my grey hairs are coming. I'm not quite ready to go grey. I want to go and get that, the personal admin time that, that you have to spend and take. So, and then you may still be doing, sort of working and all of that. So I think, the Harper Clinic has a very non-judgmental approach, because I think it's about keeping it real, doing things that fit into your lifestyle, doing in bite-sized portions, but also being very proactive and trying to prevent you getting to a point that you're going to need sort of medical care, if that makes sense. We're trying to be, we're trying to stay one step ahead.
Total sense. And I love that you've said that, because actually so many people speak about, and then so many people believe that things like HRT or even a holistic approach, but it's all just about symptom management. And actually, because of the lack of research that's been done, right? Let's face it, in women's bodies, but actually what you've talked about there is the long term, and being proactive about your future health and being aware of what can happen. And from the research that we have, like the research into women in cardiovascular disease, colon cancer, osteoporosis, that we could go on, couldn't we? When we see the drop in estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, when we see these. And also you've spoken about the mental health, and that's a huge one for me, because brain fog, people don't realize, do they? Why do people think hot flushes are like the main symptom of perimenopause? Because they're not, are they? It's not, is it?
They're not. I mean, the first symptoms I would say when women sort of enter into perimenopause, because the shift in sort of declining progesterone, the fluctuations in estrogen, the sort of ongoing changes in your testosterone level, are things like insomnia. You're not sleeping, anxiety, new things like women might say, "Gosh, I don't want to drive my car on the motorway." Being antisocial, don't want to even meet up with friends, and fatigue. And often they'll put it down to all the other things that they're juggling. It is, midlife comes with it with so many different sort of demands, sort of elderly parents, children, sort of work, all of those things that they're juggling. And they often just put it down to that. And, I remember when my joints were aching, like joint pains, so for me, it was more like fatigue. Just overwhelming fatigue, joint pains, brain fog, to the point that I thought, am I going to be able to carry on working as a doctor? And then there's me that just thought, oh, is this just normal aging? Because I hadn't been told about it or prepped for it. So I just thought, am I just getting old? And, to be thinking that 43, 44, thinking I'm just getting old, I mean, it's almost like writing myself off. And then I'm thinking, well, actually, I've probably got hopefully another 40 years ahead of me. And so I think it is all of that those juggling things that we're doing, that's why we women just think it's probably just hot flushes, because that's the only thing that they've been told about. And yes, about 60 to 70% of women do get hot flushes, but then about 60% of women do get joint pains. About 2/3 of women don't sleep that well. Many women have that feeling of that sense of loss of joy in their life, the things that they normally used to enjoy. Relationships are impacted, loss of libido because they're tired or they're not sleeping, they're irritable. It's not just a woman that's affected, it's that ripple effect around her children, her partner, her workplace. And so it can be a very damaging time if you're not prepared for it, because what if you gave up your work? That's a lot of financial security that you've given up, or your career. So I think that's why, for me, it's really important that we're having these conversations.
Absolutely, because I got so excited when you mentioned the symptom of in the car, because so many people don't realize certain symptoms could potentially be perimenopause. And I think maybe that's why as well a lot of people just focus on the hot flushes, because a lot of the other symptoms can be explained as other things. And so as women, we're conditioned to dismiss ourselves, aren't we? Oh, I'm really tired. Oh, it's because I have 2 kids, of course I'm tired. Or I'm really tired because, and we just dismiss and we don't take our symptoms seriously. But there are symptoms like all of a sudden car anxiety. You've been driving for 20 years, but all of a sudden you get really scared when you're driving in a car. I mean, this is crazy, and women just don't understand it. So you're so right. These conversations are so important.
Yeah, I mean, things like your hair changes, or thinning hair, falling out hair, even, and it's not vanity to be thinking, oh, I look in the mirror and I don't really see myself back. My skin's, I feel like I've aged, I've got more lines, my face is sagging, because, there is a much accelerated process here going on compared to men. And also, I think your body weight shifts and changes, and you're looking, and women say to me things like, my body doesn't look familiar to me. I don't like it. And all of these things directly and indirectly affect women's mental health, their confidence. Yeah. And for me, it's really about helping women to be strong, confident versions of themselves, but accepting that maybe, they don't want to do certain things anymore, or they don't want to, like I was just giving myself an example. I was thinking, I don't want to ski. I always fall down. I've hurt my knee. I'm thinking, Does it matter? For 2 weeks of the year, I don't want to. I don't want to do it. I don't need to feel like a loser and fall down every single time I'm up there. So I think it's also accepting your limitations as well in certain aspects, but in a good way. Not feeling I have to keep doing it, or I have to keep being daring, or I have to keep, sort of proving myself to somebody.
This episode is sponsored by Dr. Vegan, the award-winning supplement brand known for supporting women through life's natural transitions. If you're navigating perimenopause, it can be hard to know what support your body needs or even where to start. That's why we want to spotlight Perimenofriend by Dr. Vegan. It's a unique formula made with clinically studied ingredients like botanicals, phytoestrogens, and minerals specifically developed to support women during perimenopause. Perimenofriend is designed to support hormonal regulation, energy, mental performance, and well-being, whether or not you're using HRT. It's trusted by thousands of women worldwide, and a consumer survey conducted by Dr. Vegan of over 900 women showed 95% felt the difference in 4 weeks or more. They've also given us an exclusive offer, so you can get 20% off your first order with code HOH20 at drvegan.com. And I'm so sick of this conversation around vanity and I've spoken a lot about this. My background is psychology, and if you feel down about yourself, you spoke about weight gain and you spoke about changes in skin and changes in hair, and it does happen. And your mental health is as important as your physical health. And I wish it was just treated as such, and women weren't just kind of constantly told, because they want to use certain skin products or do certain things or dye their hair or anything, but they weren't kind of pigeonholed as being vain or vanity. It's so dismissive.
Yeah, and I think one of the key things here is, you said about at the Harper Clinic, what do we do? How do we do things differently at that 360 approach? I mean, one of the things is with the weight loss injections, it's one of the things we've incorporated as part of the clinic, because women are finding it harder and harder to sort of shift the weight gain, and not understanding why they've gained this weight when they feel that they haven't really changed a huge amount. They are getting cravings, because of hormonal change. It's almost one of the other ways, you mentioned puberty, but for those women maybe who've experienced PMS, another way of thinking about it is perimenopause can feel like, your PMS symptoms of, instead of being 5 to 7 days, is now 10 to 14 days, or 14 to 21 days. And many women experience things like sugar cravings, carb cravings, feel out of control. Yeah. And I think it's about helping women to get that control back. And so for me, adding in, the weight loss injections, when and if they're appropriate, isn't about vanity. Women do feel so much better when they look better. I've often said that, when their mood lifts, when they feel that they're more in control of their body, but also, from the long-term implications of those metabolic disturbances of menopause, insulin resistance, weight gain, increasing your risks when it comes to diabetes, and heart disease. Actually, let's look at the bigger picture. We're reducing health risks. We're optimizing health. It's not about making people skinny minis. It's about making them, healthy, fit, and strong.
Strong over skinny, right? That's really interesting that you've mentioned that. So I haven't asked anybody about this more. So we're talking about things like Ozempic, right? And Wegovy. And so some of the research that I've read around them is that yes, you lose weight, but sometimes a lot of the weight that you might lose might be muscle mass. And obviously we see with a drop in estrogen that women can also lose. So talk to me a little bit about that.
So I suppose with a drop in estrogen, what tends to happen is the redistribution of fat, and the loss of testosterone also means, you lose muscle, and that's why we talk a lot about sort of women should increase protein in their diet, and do resistance training, because often, our generation haven't really been taught about protein intake. We've just been taught about, calories in, calories out. We haven't really been told about, we need to build muscle or by doing strength training, or if we have, it's been mainly sort of cardio or tiny little weights. So, when people talk about these things with the weight loss injections, like Wegovy, like Mounjaro, when you lose weight, you will lose fat, you may lose a bit of muscle, but the way to mitigate that is by going slow. Anybody who does rapid weight loss will lose muscle. They will find that their hair falls out as well, in those instances. But, what you want to do is, my approach is usually that we go slow and we start low. We don't just jump up the doses really, really quickly. And alongside, in parallel, you must also ensure that you've got protein intake. You're doing the right, sort of resistance and muscle maintenance exercise, but also the psychological aspect. It's about sort of, and you as a psychologist will understand, it's about sort of reframing your relationship with food,
Yeah.
looking at, and if you don't do that, then when and if you stop these injections, you will gain the weight back. And yo-yo, for me, I think one of the worst things is yo-yo dieting, because what you're doing, you're losing fat, you're losing muscle, but then when you gain weight, you gain fat, and then actually what you're doing over time is worsening your body composition, you're worsening your metabolism. So that's why it's better to do it in a slow, controlled manner, but like I said, in parallel with ensuring that you sort of eat protein, maintain muscle, and also mentally, psychologically, sort of get a handle on, why you're eating what you're eating, and how you're eating. Because a lot of women start to graze or they snack, and we need to understand, well, actually, it's insulin resistance which is causing this, and how can we bring that resistance down? How can we improve sensitivity? So it's a combination of all of those factors. It's not just here's your weight loss injection, lose a bit of weight, because if you don't understand why and how it's working, or what you have to do as part of your homework alongside it, you're just going to gain it back, and that's actually going to put you in a worse place than where you may well have started.
And I think our generations that's huge, reframing our relationship with food, because our generation, I think it won't be such a big problem for the younger generations, because I already see that they have a better relationship with food, and there isn't so much dieting. They're already going to the gym more. They're already kind of like, it's now cool to be healthy. It wasn't when we were younger, and it was lots of fad diets pushed to women, and it was, I won't mention them, but lots of different people making money out of different fad diets for women, and women have been subject to this for years. And so it is now about really, like you said, reframing that relationship that you had with food. And that's really difficult. So it's amazing to hear that you really, push that and support that with women. I want to talk to you about, obviously, about HRT. There is still so much confusion around. I cannot tell you the amount of conversations I have with women on a daily basis. And I'm talking women my age, I'm 40, women that are older than me, women that are younger than me, and they really know nothing. Can you break down the common myths and versus the science? What is the reality? Who is it for?
So HRT is hormone, the words are hormone replacement therapy. I think I personally prefer maybe calling it MHT, medical hormone treatment, because hormone replacement therapy feels like it's replacing, or it's only for those women whose periods have stopped. So actually, you can start having sort of HRT or medical hormone treatment, even when you still have periods, but when you're noticing the changes due to your hormonal shifts. And I think, that's quite a nice way of putting it. When your hormones are shifting and the levels are declining. And so, it's very much there to manage the symptoms that you're experiencing, the acute phase, like your joint aches and pains, your brain fog, your insomnia, your hot flushes. But also, we know from the science that they can have a protective long-term effect, like reducing your risk of colon cancer, reducing risk of osteoporosis, reducing your risk of heart disease. So there are lots of sort of positives to be thinking about for the future. And I think the myths are still, based on those old studies that that is going to increase your risk of breast cancer, and heart disease. And I think that study, the Women's Health Initiative study from 2001, when you look at the women that were in the study, they were a BMI or body mass index of 28, and the average age was 63. So they had started HRT at a much older age and were already had higher risk factors at that point. So I think it's very much about personalizing the risks versus benefits for each woman. Some women are very confused about it, and feel like, well, look, menopause is a natural phase in life. Am I meddling with nature? In a way, should I even be adding something back to my body? And one of the ways things I say to women is, look, if you had an underactive thyroid and you came to see me as a GP, I'd prescribe you some thyroid medication. And you wouldn't say to me, oh, but, I think it's just underactive because, I'm getting older or anything. It's just because your thyroid's not working as well. And it's the same with your ovaries. They're not working as well as they used to. They've aged, or they're aging, and so they're not producing as much hormone, which maybe 100 years ago wouldn't matter, because menopause, the average age was about 55, and now it's around 50, 51. But also, 100 years ago, we'd be dead by 60. Whereas for us, menopause is midlife. And, if you think about, average life expectancy for women, it's in their late 70s, and some women will live much older than that. So you can have about 40 to 50% of your life almost, post-menopause. So for me, it's about sort of saying to a woman, look, let's weigh up the benefits versus the negatives for you. You worry, lots of women worry about breast cancer, but nowadays we have what we call the body identicals, which are chemically identical to the natural hormones that our body would produce. And actually, what are the bigger risk factors for breast cancer is weight. Being obese is the biggest risk factor. Drinking 2 glasses of wine every night, not exercising, smoking. And, yes, if you lump all HRTs together, including the synthetics, there is a slight increase in risk. But, often, if you are somebody, in the throes of perimenopausal symptoms, not sleeping, having carb cravings, you're sitting at home, sort of comfort eating, gaining weight, not moving, actually, you're putting yourself at risk just by doing nothing. And so it's about weighing it up for you, what the benefits versus the negatives are. I am a very strong advocate of it. I don't see it as a silver bullet for everything. It doesn't mean to say you can sit there and not go and do your sort of exercise or movement, or look at what you're eating, diet. And I also think things like managing stress is also key around this point. And also, it doesn't mean to say, for those women who can't go onto HRT because of sort of medical reasons, that you can't also reduce your risks for things like heart disease, osteoporosis by diet, nutrition. Yes, you may have to work a little harder at it, and be a bit more regimented about it. But I think, it's not the be all and end all, but I do think it's a great, great, great tool for many women. And, each woman, and I'm about informed choices. I want women to understand this is what it is. This is what it can do. It's not like the HRT from 25 years ago when you worry about breast cancer risk. If you are a 70-year-old woman starting on HRT, yes, your risk is going to be higher because your risk is already high, when it comes to breast cancer because of your age, being a woman. But, starting hormone treatment when you are in your 40s and 50s, you can balance all of that risk by mitigating what we call those modifiable risk factors, like, you're looking at after your weight, eating healthy, moving more, stopping smoking, and reducing alcohol intake.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned alcohol intake and you mentioned a glass of wine earlier, and I'm not trying to dig out any of our listeners who enjoy a glass of wine. There's nothing wrong with that. Well, there is a lot wrong with it, but everyone can do what they want to do and make their own choices. But it's amazing, isn't it, when you present that to people and you say, but look, here are the risks with a glass of wine. But we'll still have that glass of wine. But there seems to be so much controversy around the HRT. I want to ask you about the difference between bioidentical and body identical, and which one do the NHS use and why?
But bioidentical means that the hormones are the same chemical formulation as your natural hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. Body identical also means that they are the same chemical formulation as your natural body hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. But body identical, the reason why we use the word there is because they're regulated. Those are the ones that the studies have been done on, whereas the bioidentical ones are the ones which are unregulated, made by compound pharmacies. And so they haven't gone through the sort of same regulations as the body identicals. Body identical is what's prescribed in the NHS. It's what I tend to prescribe. Sometimes there is a place for a bioidentical, but you would have to understand that this is off license, it's unregulated, but that doesn't mean to say they don't have a place or could have a place. But on the whole, I think we prefer to stick to the body identicals because we know those are the ones regulated, have the studies, and we've got the data behind them.
And what would you say to, women who are just entering perimenopause? So women in their late 30s, early 40s, should they wait until their symptoms are getting worse and worse, or they're having more symptoms?
Time to have a bit of like an MOT, because there are so many sort of great pretenders of perimenopause. And I'm not saying that your symptoms aren't perimenopause, but we should rule out things like, underactive thyroid will make you feel tired, brain fog, weight gain. An overactive thyroid will make you have palpitations, maybe feel anxious. So the other things are things like fibromyalgia, sort of that when you get sort of joint aches and pains. Vitamin D deficiency will make you feel sort of tired, sluggish, a brain fog, and also affect your weight management. And many women are anemic, iron deficiency because of maybe heavy periods. Again, that will make you feel tired. It will cause you to maybe get palpitations, shortness of breath, hair falling out. So I often think this is a great time to really have that sort of check-in. It's not really about your hormones at this point, the check-in. It's more about looking at your overall health and thinking, well, look, are there other things that we can optimize? So for me, it's not about being in the normal range. It's about being optimal for you, because the normal range is quite wide and, somebody could just be within it and actually could still benefit from, like, for example, I'd say vitamin B12, the normal range is like 250 to sort of 750, 800. If you're at 280, somebody may say, well, you're in the normal range, but you may be displaying symptoms of a vitamin B12 deficiency. So it's better for me to optimize you. So for me, I think there's a lot to be done around this time, which is a jointly needs to be done, looking at ensuring that you are optimal for all of your sort of nutrients, checking that there isn't anything else going on, like your thyroid is not working as well as it should do. And then sitting back and thinking, well, actually, could it be perimenopause now? We've done all of that. Where should we go next? And I don't think you need to wait until your symptoms are really bad. It's more about how they affect you. If you have symptoms and it's stopping you from working, or it's really affecting your mood, or you're not sleeping. So I don't think you have to wait until you get them to a sort of a severe point. But if you've done everything that you can do, then actually, that might be the time to add in the HRT at that point. That might be the time to consider it. And sometimes, it may be just worthwhile a trial of 3 months. When you're not sure, like I have many women come in and saying, look, I don't know if it's my menopause or if it's my marriage. I'm fed up. Think, let's not make a big decision right now. But let's see if we do add in some HRT. Does that help you with your symptoms? Is that going to make you feel a little bit more balanced for you? So I think there can be a little bit of trial and error. And so often there is, when we add in some hormones, because it may take a little bit, few goes to get to the right version for you.
Yeah, that's such a really great way of thinking of it, because most women will know, even from our periods, we know how much you can change within a day. So like how you feel the day before your period, how you feel the day you get your period. Like most of us are aware of that huge shift in how hormones can really make us feel very different. So that's, a great idea. Like just, do a trial and see how you feel. One of the things I get a lot when speaking about hormone replacement is things like people saying, so if I go on it, am I just on it forever then? I just have to take this forever. And then the other thing that I get is, I hear people talk about is, well, I don't, and I am one of these people, by the way, but I don't take paracetamol, or, like I just don't take tablets or medication. I'm not a huge one for taking things. Like many, perimenopause can leave you feeling low in energy and mood. It almost feels like puberty all over again, with all the skin, body, hormonal changes. That is why we want to showcase Dr. Vegan's menopause range to help women navigate this difficult period in their lives. MenoFriend and PerimenopFriend are multi-award winning formulas of clinically studied ingredients, including phytoestrogens, botanicals, and minerals for a comfortable menopause. They are formulated for hormonal regulation, mood, energy, clearer thinking, mental performance, muscles, and joints. Not only that, but they're loved by over 50,000 women worldwide. It can be really difficult to know how to support your menopause journey, but these formulas can be taken alongside HRT to give maximum support. It can be really difficult to know how to support your menopause journey, but these formulas can be taken alone or alongside HRT to give maximum support. Dr. Vegan have also given us a unique discount code to try their products. Try today at drvegan.com and get 20% off your first order using code HOH20 at the checkout.
So yeah, I mean, look, once you're on it, it doesn't mean to say you have to stay on it. Personally, I think that, I feel great on it. I don't see myself rushing off it, unless there was medical indication to do it. And if I go back to my analogy of the underactive thyroid and being on, thyroid medication, you're not going to stop that at any point in time. So for me, I would say, look, I plan to stay on it unless there's a reason, something changes medically. Some women do think, well, look, you know what, I want to sort of go back to the natural way, or I want to sort of age. And I do think perimenopause is probably the most challenging phase because when you're younger, if you have an hour's less sleep, your body's a little bit more elastic. It can sort of adapt a bit better. If you gained a few pounds, you could maybe just cut out carbs for a couple of weeks. You would lose those few pounds. But I think in perimenopause, you find that the path you're walking on becomes narrower and narrower, and you're sort of thinking, "Gosh, I'm getting older," or and you're trying to hold on to your 30s, and then by the time you get to 50, you just think, "Fuck it," I'm you're more confident in yourself. So I think perimenopause is challenging, and sometimes some women, they get to that point that they think, well, now I feel ready to accept the changes that have happened in my body or are happening in my body. Maybe I'm happy now to that they may think I want to accept the grey, or I want to in their hair, and so they get to a more confident, in controlled point. And if they then choose and say to me, look, I'd like to come off, my lifestyle's changed, I'm not having to work so intensely, I've moved, I like to just see how I feel without, then I would wean them off. I would never get somebody to go cold turkey.
You're giving us this example just, as an example. Can I ask you honestly, how many people that start taking hormones, how many people actually want to come off them, roughly?
Most will stay on them, I will say.
Yeah.
I the ones that maybe react a bit badly or are a bit sensitive to it, will come off it, or we'll find another plan for them. But I would say you can reduce the dose. So sometimes, if I said, given the example of somebody moving to the countryside and, sort of almost like getting out of the rat race, maybe they don't need the testosterone, or they don't, or they think, oh, I really don't want to have sex anymore, it doesn't bother me, so we can reduce their dose and tailor it to their sort of needs and lifestyle, while still protecting their bones and their heart and their brain, and still managing symptoms. So sometimes I think you can reduce the dose. And I think because very much stress has a big part to play. I mean, I live in London, and I think, when I go on holiday, I can tweak it down a little bit, because I don't need to be always on fire, as it were, whereas, I could have that nap in the middle of the day. I've got meals prepared for me. I often joke and sort of say, if I was a billionaire on a super yacht, I had a chef and a PT, and I could have my nap in the middle of the day, maybe I wouldn't need as much. I'd be thinking about it more from the bigger picture, the long-term benefits. But I think as women, there are so many more demands on us these days, that is, it's a different, that's why probably, we need it more so in the here and now, but we can reduce the dose over time. But, to be honest, I think very, very, very few women come off it. I mean, I would say, yes, a handful have, and they embrace the and accept how their body and is changing, and they want to do it like that, which is, I'm very happy to support them through that. And again, we will still look after them and make sure that they stay their healthiest version.
Yeah, I think there is so many questions around, that and people that want to live a bit of a natural life. And, there's so much around ultra processed food and also the chemicals that we're putting on our body with our moisturizers and all this type of thing. So people are really going through a phase of trying to eradicate all of that. And so I think that will be the argument from some people. But what I always think, and I think I can be a little bit riskier in saying things because I'm not a medical doctor. And obviously, you've got to be so careful with what you say. But your example of the thyroid was perfect. Because what sometimes I say to people is, well, if you had a vitamin D deficiency, you would take a vitamin D supplement. And so, but obviously, that's me kind of reframing hormones.
The thyroid analogy, because your ovaries are never going to fire up again and suddenly start producing their own hormone. And look, I'm a great advocate of HRT. I think it's a game changer for so many women. I think it's also a catalyst, for women to live the life that they want to live, in the sense of it gives them the energy to go and exercise, be more mindful when they're eating, sort of, I think, so for me, I do believe in it. I do, but I wouldn't force it down anybody.
Yeah.
I would sit down and we would talk about it and then make that decision. So I think it's, as I said, it's about going back to informed choices for women.
Yeah.
Some women choose, but I sometimes sort of give the analogy, like, about my little spare tire here. I say, look, if I really wanted to get a six pack, I'm sure I could, sort of eat chicken and broccoli and exercise. But at the end of the day, I like a bit of cake and chocolate, and so it's a sort of the balance in life. I'm not going to take all the joys out of my life just for the six pack.
Yeah, you've just got to weigh up your balances and find a happy point in your life where you're happy, but you can also enjoy yourself. And
Yeah.
obviously you've been out there helping women at this point in their life for years. And how do you feel now that the conversation is moving? So there is a little bit more research being done. Like there's an exciting bit of research being done with Dr. Lisa Mosconi, and I'm really excited about that. All the neurological things really get me excited. But how do you feel? Because obviously you've been doing this for years and there has been a bit of a shift in the conversation.
I started off at the beginning saying, my mother has dementia, and I was sure that it had accelerated around the menopause, yet there was no sort of, sort of hard evidence. And that's why it's great to see people like Lisa Mosconi putting all of those observations that we, people had seen, the changes that had happened to women. We're putting it into sort of clinical trials and getting the papers and the science out and about. So I'm really glad that there is more research being done in women's health. I think that
you feel vindicated. Do you feel like, see, I told you? Like, do you want to say, I told you so?
Yeah, I do. But I also think that, people are more about quality of life rather than quantity of life. I feel it's more about sort of health span rather than lifespan. So I think it's great. I don't think it's going to stop me doing what I'm doing, because in the sense of, it's just recently that we've started to invest and do the research. And, for the women in the here and now, we can't wait 20 years until we've got the trials out. And I think we don't want to wait 20 years for that, to be told, oh, yes, actually, you were right 20 years ago. This is great. This, you should be on this. And I don't want a whole generation of women to miss out. And that's why it's very, very important to ensure that it's about balancing each woman's risks and benefits individually. But I think it's great that we're having a lot of conversation. I think it can also be very confusing for women, because now everybody seems to be an expert on social media or talking about it from, one angle and another angle. And I think that I do feel maybe our healthcare system needs a little bit of catching up. It's now, yes, I'm a private doctor. I did 25 years of the NHS. Partly I'm private because I knew I'd be burnt out and, put out to pasture if I'd stayed there. But I think, I wish there was a more sort of balanced sort of healthcare for women and accessibility. But I think it's great that more people are talking about it. It's in the news nearly every single day. Something's up.
But
Um,
it's because of women like you. It is because of women like you. It is, and also we have some amazing doctors, Dr. Nigata Reef, Dr. Aziza Sessa, who's been on the podcast, Dr. Kelly Casperson, who's been on the podcast. It's
yeah.
women like you who are really pushing the boundaries in women's healthcare. And unfortunately, have you had to pay the price for that? Like, I'm sure you've come up against a lot of criticism over the years because of some of the things you say.
Maybe in the beginning I was much, much more guarded, about wanting to say the right things. I think, because everybody wants to fit in and be accepted. I think as I've grown in confidence, I think, well, actually, I practice very safely, but I do want to stay ahead of the curve and push boundaries. And, I've got 5 sisters, younger sisters than me. So for me, women's healthcare is really, really important. And I think about how I would want to be treated, how my sisters I'd want them to be treated. So yeah, sometimes there are a few odd DMs and messages and things like that. But I'm going to be honest, most of the time people have been really lovely to me. And, because very much I'll explain why I'm doing, and you may not agree with me, but, I, like I said, it's all about practicing safely. And for me, it's about the woman first,
Yeah.
rather than, there are some people that say, well, there's not the evidence to give testosterone because somebody's feeling tired or something like that, or for their brain fog or something like that. And I think, well, because the clinical indication is for low libido or hyperactive sexual desire disorder. And I said, well, look, as a woman, if I'm tired, if I'm not sleeping that well, if I've got no energy, the last thing on my mind is going to be sex, But, indirectly, I have got low libido. And unless but I'm not going to come into the doctor and say I've got low libido. I'm going to say I'm tired. I'm not sleeping. I've got no energy. I've gained weight. I don't like the way I look. So obviously I'm not going to feel sexy or confident. So I think it's about me. I look at things slightly differently. I think I've always looked at things slightly differently.
I'm so pleased you brought that up because actually, let's talk about testosterone for a second. So, essentially, women have to say the words to their doctor, I've got low libido, to even be for them even to contemplate giving testosterone. And even then, on the NHS, you basically can't get it unless you go and see a specialist. And it's a whole long-winded situation for women in the UK. And obviously, you will know that it's a bit different if they come to a private clinic with you. But isn't that just so jarring? Yet one of the other symptoms of low testosterone is loss of joy of life. How is that less important than
Yeah.
how is that less important than I have a low libido? Like, isn't that just so frustrating?
Low libido, and that's why it's okay, because that's okay for men to understand. But I feel annoyed that women have to sort of play a game, and some women may not be interested in sex because they just can't be asked, or they just feel like, I've got to that point, I'm not bothered about that. But they are bothered that they haven't got that energy, or they feel flat, and like you said, loss of joy, that apathy, that demotivation. They don't have that drive, in their workplaces. And so I think it's unfortunate that we have to do that. And I think,
Yeah, because
unfortunately, like I said,
if they go in and say that, they won't be offered it. They have to say the secret keyword, loss of libido, to unlock the special golden, like that's how it feels though, isn't it?
absolutely, or the doctor has to ask that specific question, and in that 10 minutes, maybe the doctor might not ask that question. So I think it is about looking at the direct effects, the indirect effects, and maybe that's partly as a woman myself. I'm thinking, gosh, if I'm tired, or if I'm sort of my hair's falling out, or I feel my skin's changed, I've gained some weight, I'm not sleeping so well. I'm really not going to be thinking, yeah, I want to get jiggy or anything. I'm just going to be thinking, I've got, I'm not just not going to be thinking about it. So I'm not
Yeah.
going to go to my doctor with low libido because it's not a priority for me, because the priority is for me to feel back to being like myself.
What's happening in the world of testosterone? So, I mean, I kind of have it on good authority that there are new products being made for all of our listeners. that maybe don't know as much about the world of testosterone as maybe you and I do. A lot of the products are only really made for men, to the point where there's sachets and women have to use like an eighth of it a day. And, there isn't like
No.
a nice bottle that gives the right amount. What's going on there? Do you know of product?
Very frustrating, yeah, because it's actually one of the areas that I've been working in to try and make a product, but the hoops that we have to go through, and it just means that I've just sort of parked it for the moment. But there's apparently a patch that might be coming out in a few years' time. It's really it's a ridiculous stage that we're in, because there's no UK licensed testosterone product for women. It's but saying that, I'm going to say, look, don't be, and that's why doctors don't feel comfortable prescribing it, but testosterone is testosterone, whether it's female or male. It's just not licensed for women. And that's why, and what that means is if a doctor prescribes it, they're taking a risk, as it were. And if something was to happen to you, on that testosterone, you couldn't go back to the pharma company or, and the doctor could say, well, look, I told you it was off license, so you're taking on board the risk.
But let's dig into that just a little bit. I mean, I know, of course, there's risks with every medication. Actually, I was shocked to learn this. Some of the side effects of high testosterone can be, this is so annoying for women, right? Loss of hair, but like head hair, but hair growth in places you don't want it. I mean, can you make this up or what?
Well, that's why if you're starting on testosterone, you should always have a blood test done beforehand. 90% of the time, most women will have low testosterone, but at least then we've done it. We've done the tick box. But some women may, for some reason, have physiologically high. And for that woman, you don't want to then be adding more testosterone into it. So I think on the whole, you will prescribe it at a very low dose, which isn't really going to push your levels up. But some women might be a bit more sensitive than others. And, when I talked about the normal range, for her, it might be that her normal range is a bit lower. So, yes, side effects can be things like hair thinning. I think that's the biggest one that women worry about, and hair growth in places they don't want. Maybe things like acne, palpitations. They can almost feel a bit of anxiety. And also things like enlargement of your clitoris, which I mean, look, I think you've got to be having a hell of a lot of testosterone for you to have a massively enlarged clitoris, is what I'm going to say. But I'm just going to say that's where we do the blood test beforehand. So I think on the whole it's pretty safe as long as you've had the blood test beforehand, and as long as you're monitored, and you just start off on a low dose and gradually build to the right dose for you.
Everything in its turn. Like, I think we need to look at the side effects of other medications that we would just take without even thinking about it. I mean, a study that I read recently was about antibiotics and the link to mental health and depression. And so within taking an antibiotic, you are I think it's something like 40% more likely to suffer from depression within the 12 months after taking it. And that's pretty shocking.
Microbiome gets affected, and nobody sort of tells you take a probiotic alongside your antibiotic. I mean, when your gut microbiome gets affected, and one of the things is it does when we are in perimenopause, estrogen levels affect the diversity in our gut microbiome. So and then that affects your serotonin production, which is related to your mood. So yes, absolutely. But we still take antibiotics. We'll still take ibuprofen, even though if you take it too much, there's a risk of an ulcer. Everything crossing the road. I think everything has it, and that's why I get super frustrated when it's almost like people think that we as women are stupid and we can't make that decision for ourselves. But and why can't we weigh out the risks versus benefits for each one, for ourselves? I don't want to be told by somebody, you can't be on this because of this. I'd rather be like, these are the side effects, this could potentially happen, but you could also feel very good like this. And I think most women will say, look, I want to give it a try, because often in perimenopause they just say, I just don't feel like myself, I just don't feel like me, or I feel invisible. And I think they just want to feel normal again. They just want to feel back to themselves. And I think so I think it can be a very dark place for many women.
It really can. And I just want to thank you for always being a voice for women everywhere, because, of course, you run your own clinic, the Harper Clinic, but not every woman has access to, be able to come to a private health clinic. And that's why it's so amazing the work that you do by coming on podcasts or, talking and putting this information out there, so women who maybe can't come and see you or can't afford to go to a private health clinic can get access to this information and this advice. So it's really incredible that you've come on, and we thank you for that. I just want to end on one last question for those women that are our listeners that are thinking, oh, well, that's really good for people that can go to a private health clinic and get all these lovely long appointments and all this attention with these doctors that have been, specialist in this area for years. That's great, isn't it? Because I can. So those women that can't get access to that, and they are just going to their normal GP appointment if they can get one, what would you tell them to prioritize asking? And is there anything they should be doing before that appointment to help to advocate for themselves and help maximize that appointment?
Yeah, look, one of the things I didn't mention is I have written a book with my nutritionist friend Emma Bardwell called The Perimenopause Solution. And, it's available on Amazon. I feel like it's a little bit of me in your pocket. And there's, on page 283, there's a symptom questionnaire. So I think before you go in to your GP appointment, be prepared. Be prepared. Go and read about it. You don't have to get my book, but, just read about it. Download a symptom questionnaire. Go through your symptoms, because I think sometimes you may not even realize some of the symptoms you're feeling might be associated with your perimenopause.
Like the car anxiety.
100%. And if you can, maybe take a friend with you, because it can be a bit, or a partner or somebody like that with you, because you may forget some things, or you might feel a bit sort of, that you're not being taken seriously. And if you can, try and get a double appointment. So I think preparation for your appointment is key. Don't just go in and then you've forgotten half the things that you want to say. Either write them down, take somebody with you to see if you can get a double appointment. Go and buy a book. One of the other things is on Instagram, one of the reasons I do my Instagram is because I know not everybody can afford to come and see me. And every Wednesday I do a women's power hour where you can send your questions in. So I think it's about sort of being prepared when you go in, and seeing if you can have a bit of a longer appointment, but write things down and ideally take someone new with you if you can.
Well, we are going to link your book below. So anybody that wants to read that, you can. And the link will be below. We'll also link your Instagram below so people can follow you and come and ask you lots of questions. But it's just so important. These platforms are so important. And that's what the House of Hormones is all about. It's kind of about us doing the hard work so other people don't have to. Like, we're bringing the experts that we love and we trust, like yourself. And yeah, hopefully it will help women. And I definitely think this conversation, like, for anyone listening, if you've listened to this conversation, you're on a good path. Go book your appointment. If this was your sign today, go do it. But thank you, Dr. Harper. You are an incredible force. You're very inspirational, certainly an inspiration to me.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you very much.
If you enjoyed this episode today, don't forget to like and subscribe to the House of Hormones podcast. Your support really does help us reach more people and spread the word about women's health. If you want to stay connected, follow us on our social media. And here's something really important. We're on a mission to secure more funding for women's health initiatives. Sign our government petition today and help us amplify our voices for better healthcare resources and support. Together, we can make a difference. Thank you for being part of our journey. We can't wait to see you in the next episode.